Okay guys, welcome to this series on how to make games in new and emerging genres. If you're new to my videos, I'm Dr. Octobeard and I teach games design to students aged 14 to 19. So I recently ran a series on established game genres, but what I wanted to do here is look at some of the newer genres that have emerged over the last few years and really focus on how you can make games in these newer genres. This first video is looking at one of the easiest new genres to make in Unity, the walking simulator. So the term walking simulator started out as a term of abuse by hardcore gamers about what they felt weren't real games. There was no challenge, enemies, player punishment, or any of the other things that we're used to from older established game genres. The player simply walked from place to place, interacting with the environment and discovering different bits of the story.
If you can truly place your faith in another, then pick up the phone.
Despite this early criticism, the walking simulator has blossomed into its own art form and is now even searchable on Steam. Many games labelled as walking sims have gone on to scoop major awards, and many newer walking sims are now starting to add some of those more gamey features that we might expect from older, more established genres like the adventure genre. So either way, walking sims are here to stay. Which means that if, like me, you like immersive atmospheres and stories in your single-player games, walking sims are a great place to start. And if not, well then, haters gotta hate. So what's in a walking sim? Well, as the name suggests, there is a fair degree of walking around and interacting with objects that help tell a story. This can mean reading pop-up text, listening to audio, or even watching video files.
Dear Katie, so much has changed, even just since you've been away. We moved into this house. I'm at a new school. And my big sister being gone for a year doesn't make it any easier.
And of course, telling the story through objects that are just in the environment. And it's these features of immersive storytelling that anyone wanting to make a game in one of these genres is going to need to get to grips with. Okay guys, so perhaps the best way for me to illustrate what a walking simulator might look like is to play one that I've been working on. This one's called Abigail. Let's take a look, see what happens. I know I shouldn't have clicked on it, but the link said like and share, and I did. So walking simulators are based around high levels of detail, with lots of things present in the scene. So I've tried to add as much stuff as possible going on. You'll notice first of all how high the player is. It's because I want this player to be a child. That's the voice recorder. So there's a dolly on the floor. Let's go over and have a look. Somebody dropped this. They must be very lonely without it. So I've established that I can inspect things. This room's Abigail's room. I'm going to go and have a look at this poster here, this picture. Who could live in a place like this? Oh, head down. You see I can interact with pretty much everything I'm passing here. I'm going to interact with this one. Uh-oh. Just happened. What's that down there? What's that? What's that? What's that? Let's get out of here. Oh, I'm back where I started again. Okay, so I'm going to skip out of the game here. And now I'm going to get into some of the important things that I've done here in order to create a walking simulator. So walking simulators, as I said, are based entirely around the story in an immersive environment. So I've got two levels of music being played. I've got the serene music that's played when I'm in the scene to begin with, and then I've got the horror music here. So let me show you what I've done to create these three things. So as you can see, I've got a whole lot of things going on here, but for the purposes of this video, I'm really interested in just two things. I'm interested in the inspect object that allows text to come up on the screen when I walk up to something and push I, and I'm interested in the play audio script. That means I can deliver some story through audio clips as well. So what I'm going to do is take a quick look at both of these scripts, starting with the play audio script. So there are a few important things in the audio script that we're going to need, a few important variables that we're going to need right at the start. We're going to need an audio source, that's where the sound is playing from, and we're going to need an audio clip. These names here are the types of variables that we need, a source and a clip. This is the name of this particular audio source, and this is the name of this particular audio clip, because further on in the script we're going to call these two names. So at the very start of the game I need to make sure that the game knows there is an audio source attached to this object, and the object in question is this object right here, the small audio recorder. So you'll notice that this function here, void start, begins with void, which is how you begin functions in C#. However, this function down here on trigger enter begins with IE numerator. The reason for that is because I want to make it wait for 5 seconds before doing other things in here. That's what this line will do. It will make it wait for 5 seconds before it then does these other things like switching the lights on and muting the audio source and destroying the game object. I'll get to that in a second. So I'm using an IE numerator on trigger enter, collider, other. And the other, the thing that's going to collide with it, if the other is a game object and its tag is exactly equal to player, then it will do all this stuff. So before we get too much further in, if you've not done one of these before, you just got to make sure that your FPS controller, in this case your player, which starts off untagged, is tagged player. Then the script will work fine. Within the script, what it's going to do is it's going to run another function called play audio. That's down here. I'll get to that in a second. What it's then going to do, as soon as it starts playing the audio, it's going to shoot the thing that this is attached to. It's going to shoot it 15 meters straight down out of the scene. This is so the player can't keep walking up to it and starting it again and again and again. There are lots of different ways to do this, but this is the way I've found that works easiest over the years. It shoots it 15 meters down. It's going to wait 5 seconds, and then it's going to do all of this stuff, including destroy the object that this is on. Now this is very important. You'll notice when we play the game, that object doesn't disappear. The reason for that is because whilst that is the audio recorder, you'll notice I've got no scripts or anything on here. The trigger is a separate empty game object. I've just created an empty game object, and I've layered it in as a child of the main audio recorder by dragging it onto the audio recorder there to make it a child. That's got the sphere collider on it, this green ball you can see here. It's got the script, the audio script, the one that we're in at the moment, and it's got the audio source, and I've dechecked play on awake. It comes with play on awake on. I've just checked that off, and it's playing the same thing. And this is a message from an earlier game. I wouldn't use this in this game, but it's just as an example. So finally, back into the script, what it does is it runs the play audio function down here. It shoots that empty game object 15 meters down, and then it waits 5 seconds. Why does it wait 5 seconds? Because that is the length of the audio clip. So if I'm recording 15-second audio, I'd go into the script and change that to 15F. The F makes it a float because it needs to be able to count down in decimals as well as whole numbers. So it needs to be a float, 5F, 15F, so on and so forth. It's then accessing another script, which I'm not going to go into here, a script called lighting control, which you can see here. Does a whole bunch of different things, turning lights on and off. And it turns the lights on. It sets a boolean that says the lights are supposed to come on so that they come on after 5 seconds. It mutes the audio source so that whatever was playing there just stops. And it switches the bulb on. The particular bulb that's attached to is this bulb here next to it, which starts off in an off state and it switches it on into an on state. Finally, it destroys the game object that this is all on. It destroys the trigger here, this game object, because I don't want the player to keep walking into it and setting the same audio off again and again and again. So it just destroys this and takes it out of the game. The object remains, but the trigger disappears. So then, finally, I've got this script down here, void play audio. And all it is it's telling the audio source to play one shot, which is play once, play whatever variable the audio clip is up here, and to play it at 0.7 of volume, 0.7F again as a float, to play it at 70% volume. This variable here, story, this corresponds to whatever has been dragged into the story variable here. When you write this script up, this will be blank, there'll be nothing in it. You drag the audio that you want into here, and then you drag the audio that you want onto here as well to create an audio source. So if I just take these two off, I'll show you how to do that. Take that one off, and take that one off. This is the trigger object. This has got the sphere collider on it with the trigger. I'm going to drag the play audio script onto that. It's missing an audio clip there. This is the clip I want it to play. I'm going to drag that in. And then because this needs to be an audio source as well as having a clip, because the script says audio source and audio clip, then I'm just going to make sure that I drag the clip onto here. Now, if I drag it this way, it just ends up by itself in there. So I don't want to do that. Delete that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to drag it on in here, and then you'll see it appears underneath as an audio source. It starts off play on awake. I don't want it to do that, otherwise it will play as soon as I start the game. So I check that off. Save my game, go in and test. Nothing playing. I know I shouldn't have clicked on it. But the link said like and share, and I did. And there we go. Okay, the second script I want to take a look at is the script that controls these little text boxes that flash up that can also deliver some story. So you'll notice what I've done, if I just roll back slightly, is I've dumped all of my art, all of the artwork that you can look at, into one empty game object called OneArtPlease, just to organize things, keep them nice and safe. Remember, empty game objects, you create an empty, and then you can drag things to it to make it a child. Empty game objects are really useful as folders, as containers to hold other things. So in here, I think is that one art 3? Yeah, that one's art 3. So what I've got here is I've got the art itself, which is just the game object, the painting on the wall, and that's got material on it. I've then got a spotlight shining onto it from here. That spotlight gets switched on by a different script. And then what I've decided to do is for each object that is going to display text, I've given it its own canvas and text. And if I just quickly duplicate this, I can show you how I've done that. If I delete the canvas and the text, with the art selected, I can right click, I can go to UI, and I can add a canvas, and then I can right click on the canvas, I can go to UI, and I can add text. I experimented with several different ways of doing this, but this was the way I found that was best, so that you could display the interact message, press I to interact, and you could display the actual message that each thing pops up afterwards. So I'm going to delete that one because I've got this one working here. So the next thing it needs is the object script here. It's got this render mat script on it as well. We're going to ignore that for now. That just switches between the happy material and the horror material when the lights go out and the red light comes on and everything gets scary and the music plays. It displays a different material. But I'm not going to get into that here. I'll put the script up at the end instead. This is the script I want to get into, the inspect object script. The first thing I want to point out in this, because we're dealing with online text, user interface, UI, it needs to add this layer here, using UnityEngine.ui. This is the name of the script, inspect object. What I've then done is I've added a whole bunch of different things in here, and I'm going to talk about what these are for. So first of all, when I want to display the text, it's going to need to access this text here that can come up on the screen, press I to interact. So in order to do that, I need to create a variable telling it where to find the text. This string here allows me, because I've made it public, allows me in the script here to type whatever I want. So I'm going to type a load of old rubbish, and we'll see what happens in a second. Save that when we load the game. The benefit of having a string here is that each game object I drag this onto, if I look at Art 4, click here, can have something different written in it. And I can type it on the object, on the script on the object, rather than having to create 15 different scripts and type it directly into the script. By creating the string variable here, it allows me to type directly onto the object. The public float here, this is how many seconds it's going to display the text for before it disappears. So this is another string, this is a private string. This first string is actually the message that flashes up. I hate this guy, who could live in a place like this? Someone's dropped the dolly. This first string here is the one that says press I. You're going to need both of those if you want it to say press I first, and then if you want it to display the actual message. Finally, I've got a couple of booleans just to let me know if the player has moved inside the trigger area, and I can flash up the activate text that says, yes, this is being inspected, somebody wants to look at it. And then finally, to let me know whether or not the actual text is playing, the text of this object, I hate it, who's dropped this dolly, whatever that is. That's what this boolean does. It lets me know if that's on or off. At the start of the game, the inspected boolean should be off. because nobody's actually inside the box yet, no one's inspecting it. What I'm doing here, because I've got this private string, I can't just type it in the box, because this string's going to be the same for all of them. I don't need to type something different in. It would just be easier if every single object I went up to said, press I to interact. So down here I've said this string, this string is text, it's words. This string is press I to interact, and then it does that on every single script. Okay, what I've got down here is I've got the meat of this script. So first of all, I've got an on-trigger stay. And again, collider, other, if the other thing, if the game object is tagged exactly equal, double equals to player, then it turns that inspected Boolean to true. The reason I need this Boolean here is so the player can move inside it and it displays the press I to remind them how to interact with it, and then they can press I and get the other message. If inspected is true, if they're inside the object, and they push I, then display this text is true, and this is something else. This is relating to a different script. This is what controls when the red lights come on and the horror music plays, everything else. When it gets to 3, when they've inspected 3 things, that happens. You don't need this in order to make this script work. You can take that out. In fact, I'll just hash that out for a second like that. Finally, when they come out of the trigger, it would be useful to turn that inspected Boolean off so that the game knows they're not inside the trigger anymore. And of course, I don't want to display the message that was up on the screen because they're not looking at that thing anymore. I want that message to go away. So finally, what I've got here in void update is I've got a piece of script telling it to display the text, the message text, if inspected is true. If inspected is false, to null that text out. That'll make it disappear and go away when the player moves out of the box. And then finally, if inspected is true and display this text is true, display the object text for this object and display it for however many seconds I said at the top, whatever I set it to, whatever seconds I set it to in here, in this case 6 seconds. This bit makes it stay on the screen for however many seconds I told it to. Without that, it won't disappear. And then finally, this bit down here, when this reaches 0, when whatever number I said minus 1 second every second, when that is less than or equal to 0, this makes the message disappear after some time. So the whole script is here. So the final thing to be aware of, any piece of script that has an on-trigger stay or an on-trigger exit or an on-trigger enter script is obviously going to need a collider around it that is a trigger. You need to make sure that it's checked trigger. If I just frame in on this one, this is Art 4 over here, you can see I've pulled that, I've edited it, I've pulled it a little bit further out than the object, so if the player stands anywhere within that trigger, it will trigger whatever the trigger text says to trigger, which in this case is to flash up the message on the screen here, this object's text, whatever it is that I've written in this box here. So as you can see, there's a whole load of other things that you can do in your game, lights flashing on and off, things flickering under the doorways and everything else. But ultimately, if you want to create a walking simulator, which is all about immersive, emotional environment and story, then quite simply, you need a way for text to flash up on the screen, a way for audio to flash up on the screen, and you've pretty much got your game. Thanks very much for listening to this part.